Another thing to think about here is often people take out student loans under the assumption that their loans will be forgiven. And you can look up the actual stats on this. And I have a lot more on this that we'll get to at another time. But I'll just tell you this. So this is the difference, by the way, of imagine how someone might behave and the risks they might take if you were walking on a tightrope, but you knew there was a net that was going to catch you. Now imagine if you were walking on a tightrope and you thought somebody's walking on a tightrope and they thought that there was a net, but there is no net there to catch them. But they still think there is, right? Versus somebody walking on a tightrope knowing that there is no net to catch them. Those are all different situations in terms of how people would think and behave. Well, one of the nets that people think is going to catch them when they take out student loans is student loan forgiveness. And I'll just tell you right up front, your student loans will not be forgiven. Now, there are a few people, there are a small, fortunate percentage that have had some, maybe very few that have had all of their student loan debt forgiven. But it is not likely to be you. It's not likely to be anybody because of the numbers. That there are certain requirements for the student loan forgiveness programs that currently exist. There are qualifications that you have to meet that are very narrow. And some of the qualifications, sometimes people think, well, okay, I'm going to take out all these student loans and it doesn't really matter because I was told that if you teach for 5 years in a low income area, you will receive student loan forgiveness. Wrong. Some of that, it has an aspect of some truth in it, but it's not the whole picture. That may be partially true, but that means it usually has qualifications like this. You had to be making your payments on the student loans faithfully for about 10 years. Then you had to apply. And in applying, you have to perfectly fill out all the paperwork and jump through all of these hoops without errors, mistakes, misunderstandings, any of these things taking place in any of that paperwork for applying. At any time, you could realize that you do not apply, you do not qualify for student loan forgiveness because most student loan forgiveness programs are very narrow. They only apply to a few people. So look at the numbers here, and I have more on this, but it's just to communicate that there is no net there to catch you. And by the way, you're not going to vote the problem away, and you're not going to vote in free college, and you're not going to vote in somebody who's going to give you something that they do not possess. And even if you did, okay, I'm not saying one way or the other on that, but even if you did, even if you voted for the person who apparently was going to have the power within the American government to give you what you think you want as far as a quote unquote free college, it would not apply to you in the next 4 years. And even when loan forgiveness was brought up recently, which Joe Biden said he wasn't going to do it, but even when it's being pushed, They were only going to forgive $6 billion of it when it's $1.7 billion, trillion dollars, excuse me. So they were only going to forgive a portion of the problem. And if you think about this, if the situation is so dire and serious to the point of a real crisis, that these loans are such a burden on people that they need to be forgiven, then why are they being made on the one hand and forgiven on the other? That at a certain point is a broken system. So it's not that taxpayers don't spend enough for college. It's not that Americans don't care about education. It's not that the US government doesn't pour enough money into it. We're the second to Luxembourg of the amount of money that our government spends toward education in the world. It's that this system has created the incentives that make it more and more expensive each year. And unfortunately, this is a system that you guys and I have to navigate. We have to figure it out, but it is possible. But not if you go in with bad assumptions, like that your loans are going to be forgiven, because they're not. Look at the amount of people who applied, sent in applications through public service. Only 518 of those people actually got it in March 2019. That's 0.7%, less than 1%. So I recommend if somebody has student loan, and they think, okay, well, maybe I do qualify for one of those student loan forgiveness programs. That is a tertiary strategy for dealing with the loans. There's primary, secondary, tertiary, meaning you can do it, doesn't hurt to ask, but don't depend on it. It's kind of like in Malcolm in the Middle. Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle, they ask him something, they're like celebrating his birthday and it's kind of lame. And they ask him, are you having a good birthday? And he goes, I expect nothing and I'm still disappointed. That's student loan forgiveness. Expect nothing, be ready to be disappointed.